Hello and welcome to the Essential Property Podcast with your hosts, Paul Samuda and Amanda Woodward. With 45 years of combined experience in the world of property buying, selling, investing and developing, they are here to share with you their knowledge in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme and Crewe property market. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Essential Property Podcast with myself, Amanda Woodward and Paul Samuda. And today we are going to be catching up on Project OneB amongst a whole bunch of other things, as we have been a little bit quiet over the last couple of months, and we'll share with you why and what we've been up to since our last episode. So this will be vlog 3 of our Project OneB series, where we share with you the ups, downs, trials, tribulations and progress of the larger development that we're doing in Stoke-on-Trent at the moment. So we'll be filling you in on that. And as always, keeping you in the loop with what's happening economically in the market with interest rates, renters reform bill and all other things sort of property investing related. So we finished up on the second Project OneB episode, and the project was at moving on to second fix. So we'd put in the kitchens, we'd put in the sanitary of the bathrooms, and the tilers had just started the tiling of 12 bathrooms. We had chosen some really funky tiles and grout colours, and they were very much up for the job, which we were quite excited about. So that's where we were up to. So since then, fast forward to now, we are days, perhaps a couple of weeks away max of launching and being live. So I'll just hand you over to Paul to give you sort of a bit of a detailed overview of what's been going on at Project OneB over the last, 2 months.
Yeah, it does feel like quite a few months that we've been away. It's only actually been 2.5 months, but in that time we've been extremely busy with our project. And I think since we last spoke, we focused a little bit more on the design element. When you have a building of this size, I always try to approach it with what's the theme going to be, as opposed to it's a bunch of rooms with a nice feature wall. Is there going to be a bit of a theme? Is there going to be a bit of a color that follows through? Does that reflect in the building or the period? Which probably sounds a little bit over the top, but Amanda and I discussed quite a lot is that this is in a part of Stoke which is not popular for what we would consider high-end HMO. A little bit more popular for SA because it's nearer sort of places like Trent Gardens and easy access to different work venues where people come in for contracting. But from a typical professional HMO, it's not your number one destination. So we had approached it that we were going to design this almost as if it was a destination, that people would see, want to live there. It's close to the train station, which is a plus if they had to take a train back into Hanley. And it was going to be effectively a cut above the rest. So that was our brief to ourselves. So we got to the stage now that the kitchen was in, is actually setting about and working on the decorating. And, true to form in this business, everything was going to plan until our painter let us down. He came in one day and then we didn't see him. He was supposed to bring a team and he didn't turn up. But these things happen in this business. So we had to find another painter decorator, which actually was from out of the area, who had done some stuff for us before. It's probably, pretty decent quality. So he was able to jump in and do what's worked out to be quite a great job on that. So we're at the stage where we had to decide what was going to go in the room, what the theme of the rooms are, what the colors were going to be, what people are going to feel like when they walk in and when they walk into their bedroom, when they walk into the building. What do you want them to feel like? Do you want them to feel as if they're in, basic shared accommodation? Do we want them to feel as if they're in this grand building and it's a home? And I said to Amanda that I think we want people to walk in. If they walked in with a friend and the friend would say, wow, you live here. This is amazing. And we set about doing that in as cost-effective way as possible. We engaged in interior designers, which we have done on the last 3 jobs we've done, because whilst they don't do purchases and things like that for us, they give me a bit of a kickoff in terms of colors and ideas. And I discuss a few things with them. I drive them mad, they always say, but we come up with a good starting point in terms of the look and feel of the rooms and the common areas and things like that. So we had decided on theme. We were able to maintain some original features, which is always helpful, but nothing like what we would like. I think we had to reduce the ceiling size for all but one of the bedrooms, but we kept the original high ceilings in some of the common areas. And that was purely because to get our EPC rating for that level C. And also from a heating standpoint, hot air rises and all the air will just disappear if you don't have lowish type ceiling. So on balance, I think it was 2.8 meters we sort of settled on. Normally it's 2.4, but we had ceilings as high as 3.2, 3.4 meter high ceilings. So we wanted to maintain what we could in terms of the original features and accentuate that. Our rooms are large. I think the smallest room we have is something like 11.5, 12 square meters. And the largest room/studio, we actually call them studios and suites, is something like 24 square meters. So they're big rooms. And that was going to be a selling point for the people staying there. We'll be able to take couples and there'll be room in, an incentive for people to stay there for long periods of time if they were stopping as an HMO. Equally, if we were doing a little bit of short stay, which we do, they were big enough for maybe a family to be there for a long weekend if they were visiting the local attractions. We decided on the room categories. There were 4 different room categories. Amanda will probably remind me of what those were.
So we have our standard double en suites. We have our studios. Then we have our suites, and then we have our superior suites.
Okay.
So our superior suites are the largest rooms. They have sort of a small kitchenette style area in the rooms, along with gorgeous bathrooms. And some of them have a little special feature, which we will release when we release the photos at the end of the project. Our regular suites don't have the kitchenette. And then we sort of have our double ensuite rooms. So we split them up for pricing. So we could price the rooms differently. Manage expectations as well. So when a guest or a tenant sees the marketing online, they can then see, this room comes under this category and it's this price. Or if you want, our sort of creme de la creme and the fabulous high-end room, then it's, X price, and there's a lot more involved in the room.
I think we have picked that up on our previous projects. And again, it's something which people who are doing HMOs, I don't think spend enough time on, where they look at creating different style rooms for different requirements. Some people want bigger rooms. Some people have a budget for smaller rooms. Some people want rooms a little bit more character, slightly larger bathrooms. And I think if you can build that within your development, obviously the bigger the development, the better, the more flexibility you have, the better. But we certainly learned that of previous projects, that people will pay a little bit more for a little bit more amenity. And I think in the environment we're in now, cost of living crisis, I think it's important to give good quality, but also good value at the same time, because people like the all-inclusive option. They've had a taste of the high bills, and the all-inclusive option is obviously, even for people who are probably trading down from a 1-bedroom apartment, I think they want quality. So that's been a large ingredient within our planning to have these suites and double ensuite rooms and studios. In our studios, we don't allow cooking per se. So our kitchenette involves a fridge and a microwave. So there's no hot plate or mini cooker there. Not to say we couldn't, but it goes into a whole new fire safety regulations, and the regulations around this building and Bain as it is. And I think Amanda's going to touch on that a little bit later. So once we've decided the different room categories, then we were going to agree on the theme. And the theme is normally around color and what's going to be included. And typically, nothing new here. It's going to be a small double bed, standard double. We have no singles in this property, which is probably a first. There are no singles in this property. And then we normally have either open closets or full wardrobes. And our experience is that people prefer full wardrobe if they're living at the property. If they're short staying, then open closets are absolutely fine because we're only there for a few days. But we've opted for full wardrobe throughout the property. And one of the things that we decided more recently is rather than buy things flat pack, we bought them already ready to go. So we've used a company for that. And that's just saved us a whole lot of time and hassle. We have bought some flat pack things, some sort of unique things that we wanted to present. But in the main, the chests, the desks, and the wardrobes have been already made up. So the content was going to be wardrobe, desks. Every room has a desk, wardrobe, obviously, and a chest. And then another level of amenity would be some have a sofa or a comfy armchair, or in some instances, 2 armchairs. All our rooms have TVs. So that's obviously a consideration to plan where the TV is going to go. So they all come with TVs on the wall. So that was one of the thoughts that we had to put in terms of where we're going to put it, what size TV. And we went for 43-inch for the regular rooms, and the large rooms we went for 50-inch. So I think we've got 4 50-inch TVs. So we were really trying to make it quite welcoming and plush for the people that are there. And then type of beds. One of the things Amanda said, that some previous beds that we purchased before just didn't have the longevity that we would have liked. So, we switched. And we've got a combination of beds for the small doubles and the larger doubles. So we've got 3 different types of beds. But one of the most important things that Amanda mentioned, that she had some feedback from customers that the mattresses were, after a while, they were a bit dodgy, they got a bit flat. So we upgraded the mattresses. So we spent quite a lot on the mattress to make them comfortable. And I think, when we all go into hotels, one of the things that we're quite critical of is the mattress that we're sleeping on. Is it too hard? Is it too soft? Is it a bit old? And that's no different to people coming to stop in an HMO. They want to have a decent night's sleep if they intend to be there. A big one for us is lighting. This particular building was terrible for windows, I would say, for reasons I'm not too sure. The front of the property isn't bad, but as you get higher up the building, the windows are quite small. And as you start to incorporate rooms in the middle and towards the end, there was sort of 1 window in there instead of potentially 2 or potentially a skylight. So what we ensured was that we had at least 2 light fittings in a room and 2 fairly bright light fittings attached to them to ensure that made the room as bright as possible, easy to work. And they could turn one of the lights off or have both on or off as they need. We'll probably put lamps in each of the rooms as well, table lamps as well. So if someone would do some bedtime reading, it's there as well. So lighting is really quite important. We're at the stage now where create a spreadsheet. It's sort of 3 or 4 different spreadsheets. I have a spreadsheet for painting and decorating, which is basically painting, wallpaper, where that comes from, what type of paint it is, where the wallpaper comes from. I have a spreadsheet for the furniture, as furniture in the bedroom and furniture in the ensuite. Typically, the furniture in the ensuite is a mirror and a shelf, or a sort of creation of shelf and mirror combined. And then I have a spreadsheet which reflects when I purchased it and whether it's been shipped and fitted, which sounds complicated, and it is. But historically, you get a lot of stuff that comes into one place and things go missing. Either they're at our storage, or they never got shipped, or someone, unfortunately decided that, I'll have, it seems to be lying about, I'll take that with me. And it happens in every development. But in the main, this has been pretty tight, and we've pretty much got everything that we need to have now. And about 75% of the furniture has been fitted, the carpet's been fitted, wooden floors in some of the rooms. We use vinyl in some of the common areas in the kitchens. We have 2 kitchens that cater for the 12 people. And the last thing for us now is probably artwork on the walls. That's the only thing that I haven't worked on. I think I bought 1 piece of artwork for one of the kitchens, and we now have to do that. So that's where we are from a design and decorating standpoint.
I think on the practical side, one thing that we had to have a discussion about was locks.
Oh God, yeah.
So quite a, one would think simple and not, hugely important part. But anyone who runs either an HMO management business or is a landlord with a fair few properties knows that locks and keys are a nightmare. So we had quite a few years ago now opted for digital locks over traditional keys. And I much prefer them. Yes, the battery goes down sometimes. Yes, every now and again we have to swap one out, but it's far better than working with keys. So we've opted for a Yale keyless locking mechanism on every door, very secure. The same sort of locks that we'd even have on a front door, we've actually got on the bedroom doors. Very easy to change the codes, very manageable, alerts you when there's a low battery. So I'm actually quite looking forward to using them in this development because it will just make, our lives just that little bit easier. And we hope easier for the tenants as well to not have to worry about, I've lost my key. Because how many times do we hear, my HMO landlords among us will know about lost keys. So we've done that. And even something as straightforward as carpets wasn't straightforward, was it? I mean, you've got a huge building that you need to put the floor coverings for. So we chose the carpets in the bedrooms. We chose like the style of carpet. We opted for vinyl in a few rooms, laminate in a few rooms. But when it came to the communal staircase, our carpet fitter said to us, you don't want to put regular carpet. You need something very hard wearing. Okay, that makes sense. So he said, I'll get you a contract carpet. In 10 years' time, that contract carpet will still be there. It will be great. So he thought, okay, that sounds like a good idea. They fitted a contract carpet and it was horrible. Well, all right, maybe that was a little bit too strong, but it wasn't what we was expecting.
Yeah, I think the bedroom carpets were lovely, and the communal carpets just weren't as nice as the bedroom carpets.
Okay.
That's really what it boiled down to.
So we've got to try and work on that in terms of, are we going to change them? Are we going to put some rugs down? Are we, what are we going to do? So even some of the most straightforward things, if you take your eye off the ball, perhaps, or you just didn't, maybe I should have just said, well, let me see a sample of that, or let me just, I kind of took their word for it, but there we go. So as Paul said, at that point, we're sort of 75% through furnishing and we're almost ready for launch. So now we're in launch mode in terms of the management of the building, the housekeeping of the building, the maintenance of the building, the planned maintenance.
Hang on a second. You missed a vital bit. You missed the ceiling falling down.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. We had, when we bought the property, the vendor, who, was great and we have a great relationship with her, she said, I've done the flat roof. A few years ago, we had some problems with the flat roof and I've replaced the flat roof. So we thought, great. But as we started to develop the property, we started to see some leaks and basically some leaks coming into the building. So we got a few different roofing companies up there. And basically half of the flat roof had been replaced, but the other half hadn't. And presumably the other half was fine at some point, but it wasn't fine now. So we hadn't planned for any roofing work apart from, a little bit of repairs here and there. We certainly hadn't planned for sort of a $5 or $6 grand roof replacement. It got to the point where that was what we had to do. We had to replace the flat roof, put, a rubber system on it instead. So met a great company, good quote, seemed, to know what they're doing, and they did. But they took off the old roof on Monday, was come back on Tuesday to fit the new roof. And on Monday night, we all had, the heavens opened and we had rain the whole night. And whilst they had sheeted up the roof as a bit of a protection, they had not foreseen the amount of rain that we was going to have. So we arrived the next morning and in room 13, it was basically raining inside the room. At this point, we were fully plastered, fully second fix, painted, ready to go. And the ceiling had fallen in, the insulation was soaking wet, and it looked even worse than when we bought it, 6 months before that.
And I think up until then, you expect things to go wrong. And our thing probably was the roof. But having found a great roofer to do the work on that, what we didn't expect was for that to translate in the ceiling falling down as a result of that heavy rain, which you walk in and you can see rain coming through the ceiling.
Yeah. We were there with buckets trying to get, trying to stop it causing even more damage.
Yeah, light fittings have gone up. But these are the things, and you just work with them. The roofer said, look, we'll pay for replacing the plasterboards and we'll replaster that side. And, we just repainted it, and now we're pretty much finished and it's ready for the fall.
And they were great, weren't they? They were great. It was the first time that we were using them, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, we'll definitely recommend them. But I think the important thing is that there are setbacks, and some of you certainly in Stoke and Crewe would have experienced setbacks with your respective refurbs. And that's part and parcel of this business. And, the focus is to get over them, get it done. We went through 4 builders, and, there's an argument to say, look, just get it done as quick as possible so you can get it to market. But we didn't have this in the budget. We were already over budget, and we didn't have this in the budget. So we wanted to make sure that one, builders would give us the right information, or roofers give us the right information. Secondly, we wanted a comparison. So we wanted to compare 2 or 3. And whilst there's probably about £1,000, £1,500 in it, which £1,500 is what it costs to renovate, to furnish one of the rooms, so it was significant for us. But I think we found the right roofer that knows his stuff. The walls that the moisture was coming through on the back part of the property, never mind the leaky ceiling, that seems to have been solved, which is what our biggest concern was. And we'll have a nice watertight building, certainly for the next few years until the next problem occurs. So that was a bit of an event.
A curveball. And that delayed a little bit, but not a huge amount. But like you say, you can't foresee it. So we're now at the stage where we're starting to kind of get things signed off. So we had the Stoke-on-Trent City Council HMO officer come through for his initial inspection. So I showed him around and informed him of all of the sort of compliance elements that we had put in place to ensure that when it comes to licensing the building, that we have everything in place. And whilst we've done this, time and time again, it's still great to get the council in, get their feedback. And the officer gave us a few pointers. So when he comes to license the building, pretty much in a couple of weeks' time now, I guess, we'll be good to go. Because, the councils are really clamping down in terms of the compliance side of things and making the building safe. It is a 3-storey building, has got a number of rooms, and we need to make sure that we are fully compliant from a fire safety standpoint. And that's what most of it is around. When the HM officer comes out, mainly it's about fire safety.
Well, I think also, Amanda, I think we've said in the previous podcast, if not one of the blogs, that fire safety is now a thing.
Yes, yeah.
And the government, via the local council, via the fire service, are making it a definitive thing for landlords. And the other day, a couple of weeks ago, I was chatting with the head of the fire service for the whole of the West Midlands. And we were talking about Grenfell, which everything kicked off from Grenfell in London when they had that huge fire, and what's happened since. And the top and bottom of it is, I said to him, I won't quote what he said, but I said to him, it seems that none of the big boys have come into bother as a result of that whole Grenfell situation and similar type properties. So the authorities have gone for the low-hanging fruit, which are small, medium-sized landlords have small, medium-sized properties where we have to do the right thing because we can't afford to litigate or negotiate or take you to court. We just don't have those resources. So we've got to do what you say. So there's a lot of pressure now on landlords to ensure that their properties are fire safe. And, they're testing fire doors. We said that in the previous podcast. All fire doors are going to be checked and double checked. They've got a gizmo to see whether smoke is able to seep through. And certainly the conversations that we've had with building control or building inspector has been heavily slanted towards the fire safety, which is the right thing. I mean, nobody wants anybody to be severely burnt or die in their property, but it's the right thing for them to do. But it's just stressing how important that is in terms of development, 1, and 2, on an ongoing basis. And we have obviously, as a management business, put more resources in terms of ensuring that our fire safety conditions and checks are moving towards that direction.
And then in the next week or so, just before opening, we'll go through quite a rigorous fire risk assessment for the building to ensure that it complies. And that will be something that we have to keep on file and revisit periodically to make sure that building remains safe and that we're taking all the necessary, we're following the necessary protocol to keep it safe. And the fire order has been updated recently and is a lot more stricter. And it is a legal obligation for landlords to have a fire risk assessment on every HMO. And a HMO should have one on file and should be reviewed periodically. And that's something that we've been liaising with our landlords about with regards to when we're sending them our quarterly inspection reports and identifying, if there is or isn't a fire risk assessment on file, and making sure we bring that up to date to make sure that we comply. And of course, a building of this size is absolutely imperative.
Yeah. I mean, we've had really positive feedback from our quarterly inspection reports. We made it a little bit more detailed, a little bit more geared to compliance with the recent legislations. And a lot of landlords, if they're listening, have been, saying, great, wonderful, can you get this done, can you get that done, which obviously we're happy to do on behalf of the landlords. But I think the most important thing is that it's important to be aware and then to take action.
Yes.
The councils, if they find something wrong, they don't fine you there and then. They give you time to remedy it. But it's always better to be ahead of the ball so you don't have to get into that situation where you get an official notice. And that's the point of the quarterly inspections and the big inspections every half year.
Okay, so if we mentioned in the last couple of blogs that we had split the building, we said that we'd split it into sort of phase 1 and phase 2, and that we were focusing on the existing HMO upstairs to get that completed for a variety of reasons. One certainly being the cost of renovation works from when we bought the building to when we renovated it had increased dramatically. So rather than stumble, we thought, okay, let's just get moving. We'll get the first phase open. We'll start to generate some revenue and income. And then we'll look at phase 2, which is what we're looking at now, or what we've kind of even started now. So just share with us a little bit about where we're up to with phase 2 and then bringing on phase 3.
Well, there were to be 2 phases. Everything is driven by cost. I mean, the cost of capital now has gone up massively. I'm pretty good at forecasting interest rates, but I didn't think that we'd be having conversations, albeit in the press, of interest rates touching 6% as a bank base rate. It's currently 5%. I thought it would max out at 4.75%. So with that in mind, the cost of borrowing money is a lot more expensive than we thought. So we said we need to try and do this as much as we can out of our own resources before we start taking on an additional set of borrowing. So the plan was phase 1, 12 rooms, phase 2, the other 7 rooms. The issue that we have, and this is important for anybody who is doing apartments or a big HMO like this, is if you split a development into 2 phases with the intention of renting phase 1, how are the occupants of phase 1 affected by the ongoing development of phase 2? I actually spoke to a couple of people that had done that, and they said it's a frigging disaster. So with that in mind, I said, well, tell me more. What went wrong? Would you have done differently? So drew some learning from that. And the long and short of it is that whatever you think is going to go smoothly generally doesn't go smoothly. Dust is those very fine dust particles has a knack of just finding its way just about anywhere and everywhere, even when you have it blocked off and sheet covered and things like that. And then you can't underestimate the noise. So what we said, with that in mind, we would start phase 2 as we were finishing phase 1. So we had to take out a couple of quite big walls, put some steels in. We had to remove chunks of the back part of the property and create windows and doors. So we said if we were able to do that while we were in the last 25% of the project for phase 1, a lot of the dust, the dirt, the noise would be completed then. And then everything else thereafter should be minimal noise, minimal drilling and sawing and things like that. So that's what we've done. So we've created our kitchen area, our kitchen diner area, which is a lot bigger than I thought, which was great. And we've actually had kitchen designers coming to give their first sketches of what the kitchen is going to look like. We've had our construction guy knock out the back and create windows. We've actually ordered the windows. And
we got David, our structural engineer, in, didn't we, just to give it the once over and make sure that what we were doing was sound.
Yeah, which is always important. He does all our structural stuff. He does a great job. We brought him in a second time to ensure that everything is as it should be. Because sometimes when you take out a wall, it looks slightly differently than when the wall was there. I'm not saying a structural engineer guesses, they're very technical, but obviously visually seeing an exposed space is obviously a lot better than working out, where does this steel go to? Where does this bit of brickwork go to? So anyway, everything was fine there, no changes there. And we've had building regs inspector come out and have a look, and he was fine. He wanted a couple of little bits and pieces added, but nothing that was particularly worrying. So we're trying to get ahead so that it minimizes. So the objective is in the next couple of 3 weeks to have our first guests moving in. We have created a new entrance for the trades so that the front entrance is purely going to be for guests and tenants, and the rear entrance is going to be for the trades. We've cordoned off the area where we worked on with. We're actually going to block it off with plasterboard and put some wallpaper on there so it looks visually okay. So we've actually boarded off areas, so that is going to minimize the noise and any dust coming through. And I think the only way there'll be disturbances is if someone has their window open, which probably is going to happen during that summer period, and they're working from home. And then we will negotiate with them. If they're uncomfortable with noise, we'll give them a special rate for that period while it's going on or something. But I think it wasn't really an option, as much as we'd love to do phase 1 and 2 at the same time. It wasn't really an option. We need to get some income being generated just to start to pay things like our business rates, start to repay some of the loans that we've taken on for the development. And we're comfortable. We're over budget. We're a lot more over budget than we would have thought. And, a message to people doing developments is to have quite a comfortable contingency. I would say in this environment, we would normally say 10% on your build cost. I would say bump that up to 20%. And, Amanda and I have an attitude to always buy very well. There are some things you have to buy quickly, but as much as possible, you want to be able to compare prices. We've just ordered a bunch of fridges, washer dryers, and TVs and stuff, and we've shopped around and probably saved anything from 10 to 20, 25% on some of the items just by shopping around and applying discounts where we can. We reuse doors in terms of, rather than buying brand new fire doors, we've reused them, and I think the phrase is upcycled them. And that's come out beautifully. So we're very happy about that. And that goes along with the theme. So phase 2, we hope that phase 2 is going to be a 3.5 to 4 month phase. They're going to be huge rooms. Some of the rooms are going to be 3 meters wide by about 9 meters long. So somewhere they're going to be like some of the biggest rooms in the building. So around about between 25 and 30 square meters. Fully en suite. They're probably going to be our studios and suites, as I've mentioned before. So we're excited about that. Now, we can't do all 7 because we've so much over budget on phase 1. So we've done the 12. We're now doing another 3 or 4. And I say 3 or 4 purely because the 4th one is towards the front of the property. And that will have an impact on people accessing the property, tenants and guests accessing the property. So we might have to push that last room onto the final phase. So we'll have everything done and dusted in terms of phase 2. By the end of the year, we'll have new people in before Christmas. And then we'll go into New Year with a plan for the final phase, which is the front of the building. And then we'll have to have a look at how do we then compartmentalize and block off the building in a way which doesn't disturb the existing renters. There are a few issues in terms of soundproofing, in terms of insulation. We've had to insulate the whole of the ground floor because that's new legislation, because it's a conversion. So we have to do some pretty heavy insulation on the ground floor, which is important from a damp, energy saving and sound standpoint, and costs a bit more as well. And it's very time consuming, but it's got to be done. We, because of the voids that are going to be created in the ceiling, we've had to put additional fire alarm systems within those voids for phase 2. So things which previously we haven't had to do, but, you go for a bigger project, there are new things to take into account. And these are some of the new things. And as you learn, you grow, and you take that knowledge forward to your next project, and you then deploy that in your next project of a similar size. So that's where we are. So we're excited at the launch. So we're now setting things up on our system. We're gearing the team up. We hope to be taking photographs certainly within 10 days, maximum 2 weeks. Most of the furniture already in. We're going to get the cleaners in to do a beauty clean. And then we're going to put the sheets and duvets and the cushions and pillows on there. So it'll be ready for photographing, which we will upload somewhere.
We'll
upload on our podcast.
We'll put them on Instagram. So if you follow my personal Instagram page, which is Amanda Woodward Property, I'll make sure that we've got updates of the project on the Instagram page. We will be opening, Paul, for guests, and we are up against interest rates, which, we're not looking to refinance a property straight away. So that's not a direct sort of hit on us. But we are up against Renters Reform Bill.
Yeah.
And the just, again, increased legislation, regulation, and changes taking place with regards to tenants. So I think it would be, good for us, you just to say a couple of things, as I know you were on a webinar just the other day, again, bringing ourselves up to speed with all the changes as we have to keep our landlords compliant. But just share what you think some of the challenges might be in and around the Renters Reform Bill.
I think the cynical view is that if this was meant to be a landlord and tenant act, it's now a tenant and tenant act. So it benefits tenants more than it benefits landlords, for sure. Landlords are skeptical because it all boils down to evictions. When can you evict? How long before you can start the eviction process? What's the reasons for eviction? And now they're talking about a little bit of an open-ended. Section 28(1) has gone, but then that's now being pushed back to a later date for it to disappear. But what we know for sure that things are changing. And the discussion was, it's six months notice if you want to get somebody out. So, there was crazy stuff in the press about sharing profits with the tenant on a sale and stuff like that. And, you laugh, but someone's come up with that idea. And, in a world of politics, ideas, as crazy as they may sound, do come on the statute books. I'd like to say that, and rent control doesn't happen, but, stranger things have in the past. So I think for the landlord, the mindset for the landlord has to be, I want to make sure my property is compliant. I want to make sure that I have as much flexibility as possible in terms of the way my tenants are managed. And for some of the landlords that work with us, they probably understand what that means. The legislation is changing. There's always a period where there's a little bit of a grey area and people have to get up to steam. But the long and short of it is that the government is siding with the renter. They want their vote going forward, and they want to make the renter more secure. So things like not accepting pets is no longer legal, in inverted commas. Now, we're not going to have 6 dogs and cats in a 6-bedroom HMO, that's for sure. So there's some practical things that I haven't thought through and ironed out. They want to make tenancies almost open-ended, which the AST was supposed to stop. But, it means that someone can come along and say, I want a 1-month AST or 1-month stay, but can literally give them 6 months notice to get rid of them. So there's a few contradictory things that didn't quite make sense. We normally have to look to Wales and or Scotland to get a feel for what's coming down the pipe. It's almost as if the UK government, sanctions a test in those areas, see how it works for a year or two, and then copies them. The other thing is a landlord register. Each landlord might have to be licensed to be able to rent their property, be it an HMO or a buy-to-let. That is already the case in Wales. I want to say Scotland as well, but I'm not 100% sure, but certainly Wales. And that does limit what you can do as a landlord if you are not licensed. You literally aren't allowed to call a contractor to fix a problem at your rental property if you are not a licensed landlord. Now, I don't know who does the checks, but that's the way it's supposed to be. So it's our job as your property manager or your letting agent to keep an eye on that legislation to inform you and to put things in place from our standpoint, and also to highlight it so you know what your obligations are. But I think, we've got an election coming up in 2025. I suspect the next 2 years are going to be quite fraught with new legislation coming through, because politicians want to be seen to be supporting the renter as opposed to the landlord, the evil landlords who are rich and all powerful, which we all know is not the case. But, there is this perception. So I think we've got a couple of years of that. And thereafter, let's see. I think what is the flip side of all that is pushing up rates, because, some landlords are saying, you know what, I'm getting a bit old. I don't want to do this anymore. And they're saying, look, let's sell. Other landlords are picking up those properties, and great. First-time buyers are picking up those properties. Not so much now with the current interest rates, not so much doing that. But when landlords sell because they feel that, they want to retire, there's less property on the market, and that pushes up the rental rates. And that's been something that the government hasn't anticipated. And whilst the reform bill is, in theory, all great for renters, but let's face it, any extra costs, whether it's mortgage, utility costs, or even administrative costs, are going to be, at the end of the day, paid by the renter. So I can see rent going up by another 15% on average over the next year or so. Parts of the South over the last 2 years have gone up by 40%, and made worse because of rising interest rates. So that's where it is. And we're probably going to crunch some numbers and see what our next price increase is going to be, where we can, just to try and compensate. That's the right word, probably not the right word. Our landlords, in terms from the mortgage increases that they've seen, and we've seen stuff on our own portfolio where we haven't been able to fix. And you're in that difficult position, is that, do you just tough it out? Do you fix at a high rate now and wait for 2, 3, or 5 years, God forbid? Or do you just go with the track and take the pain now, and then maybe 2 years from now, things will start to ease off? Our inflation in this country is still horrific. Inflation in the US is 3 point something, and our inflation is 7.9, almost 8%. On the continent, it's 5 point something. So we're still a good 3% almost above what it is on the continent. And that's a little bit scary, because that's what drives interest rates with this Bank of England. But not to waffle, not to be doom and gloomy. What I would say, if you're a landlord, I was speaking to some landlords the other day, is that, and I've said it on this podcast, you've got to think long term.
Yes.
You've got to think long term. 10 years minimum, and then 10 years come around, you think another 10 years, because you want to hand this over to your children. It's a great pension for those who are looking to retire later on in life, and nothing goes in a straight line. So you're going to have some difficult periods like we're probably experiencing now because of high interest rates, high energy bills, and new legislation. But we've come off the back of zero interest rates, and people are like making great cash flow on the back of, very low interest rates. So you got to take the rough with the smooth, I would say. And I would say, think long term. And we have said we're not selling anything at the moment. Part of our absence is because we were trying to buy a home for ourselves, having moved. And that was painful because of the interest rates. But we are passionate about the long-term prospects for property. So we'll continue to be net buyers going forward. And if we see a deal, a couple of landlords asked me, do I see a crash? And I think the short answer is probably not. And not for the reasons that I think everything's going to be okay and there's going to be no recession. But I think, we've become a little bit of a nanny state. And when things get really bad, the government jumps in and gives a level of support, which historically has never happened before. Now, whilst we all accept that support, whether it's in terms of energy subsidies or furlough or things like that, I think that has created, call it zombie properties that under normal circumstances, they would be forced to sell or be liquidated in some shape or form. But they've just been bumping along because interest rates are so long, or they've received some sort of grant or subsidy or cheap loan via the government. So I think that has prevented any sort of crash. And I think it'll probably continue to be like that, because it's difficult. Once you go down that road, it's difficult to turn around. So I don't think there'll be a crash, but I think there'll be people who will be under pressure to sell because they've come out of a fixed rate mortgage, which was I looked at one of ours, we've got fixed rate mortgages at 1.94% for a buy-to-let. We've got others who are now looking at 9%. So, if you imagine someone's come out of 1.9% personal mortgage or buy-to-let mortgage and now paying 3 or 4 times that amount, if that's their only property, they're probably going to be forced to sell. So I think there's going to be that. So I think you'll be able to negotiate a discount. I said to landlords, anything you're buying now, you got to push for. You got to push for quite a deep discount, as deep as you can. Run the numbers, whatever the numbers work for you, then go with that in mind, but don't overpay. Don't overpay. So that's what I say about rent reform and interest rates, basically.
All right, good stuff. So I think we'll wrap it up and leave it there in terms of this episode. So I hope our listeners found it useful, enlightening, and a practical update as to where we're at with the project. And we will endeavour to keep you updated on all things property as we move forward. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if so, please hit subscribe and share with those who you think would enjoy it too. To get in touch with Paul and Amanda directly, please visit their website www.essentialpropertyoptions.co.uk for more information. We look forward to sharing with you on the next episode.